Join us now to build the universal currency we've been waiting for.
All right, Calvin, the stage is yours.
Yeah, I'm Calvin. I'm the strategy lead at Compound. So I have this demo here, and I was going to kind of tear through it. It's more of like how to drive the car rather than how does a car work kind of demo. But I think if a lot of you have used Compound, but I won't do that, maybe I'll just kind of tell like the story of Compound and some of the inflection points. So how many of you have actually used Compound, the blend or bar? I would say it's maybe like 30, 40%, 40, 50%. So I'll do this demo if that's okay.
It's just super brief. Get it.
Okay.
It's a super brief demo and then get into where you need to get into.
Okay. Cool. So this is our markets page. It's really, where I look at all the time and our whole team looks at all the time, and it's just, I'll start here and kind of describe what Compound is. There's about $160 million of assets that have been supplied to our smart contracts across 7 markets. You can see primarily like over half of the supply is Ether. The remainder is mostly DAI and USDC. About $45 million has been borrowed. The 2 primary use cases of Compound that you can see just by looking at this are people supplying Ether to borrow either DAI or USDC, and then suppliers of USD equivalents who just want to earn the interest rate on DAI of 11.5% or the interest rate on USDC of 6.5%. So the way the system works is each one of these markets, it's kind of its own pool of capital. You can see there's some amount of borrowing, $27 million in the DAI pool out of $35 million of capital that's been supplied. And that ratio of outstanding borrowing to supply basically determines where the borrowing interest rate sits on a line, our interest rate algorithm. And so every block, our smart contracts will look at this ratio, 27 to 35, and if it's changed, it'll move the borrowing interest rate along that line, up or down. So the function of how much borrowing costs in terms of interest expense is a function of liquidity in the pool. If all $35 million of DAI is borrowed, then the interest rate will go towards the upper end of this curve. And if there's no borrowing, then the interest rate for borrowing will be at the bottom end of the curve, as you can see for Ether. There's 2% is basically the base rate if there's no borrowing. And then sort of another key point is that all of the suppliers of capital share the interest that's paid by borrowers. And that's why you see this difference between interest rates, 16% to borrow and 11% to lend for DAI is not because Compound is keeping 5%, 16 minus 11, which is a lot of people initially think, but it's because there's more supply than borrowing. So per dollar of supply, folks are sharing all the interest that's paid by borrowers on a pro rata basis. All borrowing is collateralized. If you want to borrow any of these assets, you need to have supplied collateral into one of the other pools. While you've supplied your collateral, it's earning interest. So like a great kind of a profitable sort of carry trade you can do is to supply DAI and borrow Ether. If you have some view on Ether or some use for it, you'll be earning 16% on your DAI while paying only 2% to borrow Ether. And the last kind of important mechanism that's involved here is the liquidation function. So if somebody becomes under collateralized, there's a public function that anybody can call where a liquidator, which can be anybody, and there's some funds that are doing this, some bots that are doing this, some individuals that are doing this, they can come repay some of what an under collateralized borrower owes and then collect some of the collateral that they have provided with a 5% bonus. So it's basically a 5% arbitrage opportunity if you're fast, if somebody becomes under collateralized. That is the system. Actually, one last thing we introduced in version 2 of Compound, which came out about 3 months ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, is the concept of C tokens. So before, if you put, say, DAI in Compound, your DAI would be sitting there, your original wallet that you supplied DAI from would be empty, and your DAI would be earning interest, and you could withdraw it at any time. Now you get back an ERC20 token that we've deemed C tokens. So there's CDAI, CUSDC, CWBTC, and this is effectively a receipt, a fungible receipt for the assets that you've supplied to Compound that are exchangeable back to the protocol for what you've supplied at an exchange rate that adjusts based on how much the underlying asset is earning in interest. So on the day that we introduced this, if you put in one DAI, you would get 50 CDAI tokens. Whoever owns these CDAI, whether you send it to 50 different wallets or you send it to one other wallet or you keep it there, can exchange that CDAI back for DAI, with each CDAI worth 2 cents, the 50 to 1 exchange rate. And then because DAI has an interest rate, every day the CDAI is worth more DAI. So on day 100, instead of being worth 2 cents, it may be worth 2.1 cents. And so we're seeing a lot of interesting things getting built using this asset, which we think is fundamentally better than the underlying asset. Imagine if every sort of digital asset you ever owned was always being lent and earning yield at kind of like a protocol layer, but you could still do anything that you can do with DAI from a technical perspective with CDAI, because it's still just a fungible ERC20 token. So let's see. I had a really, well, I'll show you. Basically, I loaded up this one. All you do is go to app.compound.finance. I loaded up this new wallet with some DAI. Say you want to supply. It's this fast. I enable the asset so I can interact with the DAI market, which is its own smart contract. Every asset has its own smart contract. And it looks like it's enabled, so I should be able to supply it. So just supply off of the DAI. Some of the important things here, like collateral factor means against DAI how much you can borrow any other asset. So effectively, if you provide $100 in DAI, you can borrow $75 of any other asset. So we're good. This is how much my 50 DAI are worth, $49.91, and we'll be able to see this kind of like interest earned tick up in real time, maybe by the end of this thing. This is the Etherscan block explorer for this address that I just supplied from. So all I've done so far was supply 50 DAI and give it 0.1 Ether. If we refresh, you'll see I now have this amount of CDAI. And this is everything that happened. I enabled it, I sent DAI in, and then I interacted with the Compound DAI contract. I got back all these CDAI. Now what I'm going to do, this is the MetaMask for the same account. So I'm going to add CDAI. So we can see this in MetaMask. It knows that I have 2,000 or something. And I'm actually going to send it to a different demo account. Okay, so now if we go back here, you can see us trying to send it whenever that transaction confirms. And this probably just needs to refresh. But if I go back here, the CDAI's gone. You guys, I think, the Ethereum blockchain is up. It's time. Anyways, let's oh yeah, because I'm up here, I didn't actually select the amounts to send. So if we send that, is to demo that this different account. So this is a different account, and so it's 773 instead of 482. I sent the CDI. I didn't interact with our interface at all. We're going to try seeing if I switch my MetaMask to that account that has the CDI. This will eventually refresh with that supply balance. So this way, like now you can move your balances around the Compound protocol by sending the C token, and there's some interesting things you can do with this. For example, BitGo supports C tokens, so now you can, in a way, have your Compound balance in cold storage with BitGo. Now we're going to try one more thing, which is borrowing. I'm going to borrow the max I can borrow and see if Ether goes up, in which case I'll get liquidated by the end of this demo. Let's see what else we got to do. Ethereum demos are always, there's always this waiting period. MetaMask should include like a game or something that you can play when you're waiting for transactions to confirm. Anyways, all that's going to happen here is I'm enabling the ability to interact with the Ether contract so that I can supply it, I can borrow it, whatever. It's very easy. You can imagine I would specify how much I want to borrow. This is my total borrowing capacity based on how much I've supplied. It was 0.75 with around $50. It's about that much Ether. If you actually click max, we only give you 80% of that because we don't want people to put themselves on the liquidation line right away. I'm going to go ahead and borrow as much as I can just so we can see the liquidation if we get lucky and Ether goes up. So eventually we'll see this update. But that's how Compound works. I really tore through it. It's fairly self-explanatory if you go to app.compound.finance. We think that it's pretty crazy. You can earn 11% on your DAI and 6% on your USDC. We'll see where that ends up as more and more volume kind of flows into Compound in the DeFi space. But our view is like people freaked out when Robinhood was offering, I think, 3 or 3.5% on their checking account. And if we can deliver 4, 5, 6% at some stable equilibrium when we're 10 times or 50 times bigger, that's a pretty compelling product globally. So that's really our goal. Some of the things we're focused on going forward are adding new assets. So this actually starts in 6 days. These are 12 assets that are available to be voted on by the community. The vote's going to be weighted by the amount of interest that you've either earned or accrued, summed together over the history of Compound, and we'll add the top 2 assets here to the Compound protocol so that people can earn interest on them or use them as collateral. We also just announced this week this initiative to decentralize our price oracle. It's one of the sort of like really Achilles heel of our system and many DeFi systems is that we post the prices on chain, and theoretically if we got hit by a bus or there was a bad actor, we could post incorrect or stale prices. So this is an initiative where we're going to work with a bunch of different projects and exchanges and platforms to get everybody posting prices on chain and then have a neutral smart contract kind of store those prices, and any project can select the price sources that they want from this on-chain data set. We also, a huge focus for us is, our goal is really to be at the infrastructure layer of every project that's built on top of Ethereum that ever touches tokens. If you touch tokens for a minute, an hour, a day, a year, and you want to earn interest on them in that time frame, you should think about integrating with Compound and sweeping those tokens in, and you have the ability to withdraw them at any time as long as there's enough liquidity in the underlying pool. So we just revamped our developer docs. These are some examples of the projects on our webpage that we're already integrated with. There's some really interesting stuff out there. Some of the newer ones, like our DAI, is basically it's like kind of a derivative of CDAI, where you can put your DAI in Compound and specify where you want the interest to go, so you could send it somewhere else. There's some derivations of pool together, where you could there's a proposal where you could fund a project, and instead of doing an ICO, you could direct your interest to that project, or maybe unlock your capital that's stored in Compound a bit at a time based on their milestones. And if we go back here, you can see I'm now borrowing this new account. Let's see if we got liquidated. Probably not. No, I don't think so. But that's about it. Really, all of our discussion, we're really fortunate to have a really good community, and it's all in our Discord. So hop in our Discord. This is the URL to make it easier to remember. I'll put it in bit.ly. And that's it.
So how frequent is the interest being distributed? And if you withdraw, are you going to receive the interest right away? And then the second question I have is whether or not you see a lot of liquidation happening, and do you have any data on that?
Yeah, so in terms of interest, you can see right here, since I've supplied it, I've earned 0.0001 DAI. It accrues every block. You can withdraw whenever. If I want right now, I have to enable it here to withdraw in this new account, but I can withdraw all of it right now if I repaid what I borrowed. So you really can use it for a minute or an hour or however long you want. That's your choice. And to zoom out a little bit, what our goal with was Compound was to really deliver this risk-free interest rate system. And one of the risks is credit risk. That's why we require over-collateralization and have designed our liquidation mechanism really carefully. A second risk is liquidity risk, so we want people to be able to withdraw their funds whenever they want, and a pooled model helps with that because not all the funds in Compound are being borrowed. So some subset of the suppliers can withdraw their funds. And of course there's a bunch of other risks too. Let's see, I'll show you a cool... We're working with this Project Scout on getting some data around Compound. So this is very work in progress. Let's see. It's probably the events. I'll show you the liquidations that we see. Liquidated bar. So this is I'll do since we launched V2. The load, I'm on VPN, it's cool. Wi-Fi, it's hard to pull that's off from your watch. But this hasn't refreshed for date period. So this is our history of liquidation events. You can see this day is when Ether went from, I think, 320 to around 230. This day is when Ether went from around 220 or 210 to 170 recently. And yeah, these liquidations are happening fast. We've never had any risk at all of any borrower becoming under-collateralized versus 100% because they get their liquidation eligible at 133%, roughly. It works really well. So far, and we think that's because it's available to the community. Anybody can liquidate. Folks that build interfaces for it, folks that build bots for it. There's some really large funds that are participating in it.
Thank you so much, Calvin. And yeah, unfortunately, we are again running behind, so somebody needs to be the bad guy and kick everybody